Members have now conducted the private part of the agenda, and we now back on live streaming in order to go through the voting process. So I will go through all of the members here present today in order to make their vote. That vote will be totaled by officers. Councillor. So the first candidate we have is Andrew C. Anderson. Councillor Abley.
No, I'm not voting for Andrew.
Okay. Can I ask a point of order, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Geldard.
Thank you. I may have misunderstood the process. I thought we were voting for the candidate who we wanted rather than going through each candidate saying yes or no. Is that not the case?
Well, I'll bring the town clerk in on this, but we are going through a voting process. My understanding is it dependent on the results of that vote. If it's over 50%,
Yes,
then that candidate is a successful candidate.
I understand that, Madam Mayor, but in a usual voting process, we would give the name of the candidate that we wanted and say candidate one, we got a majority, that would be fine. We need to be voting on the candidate we want, not saying yes or no to each candidate. Otherwise, you give a clear advantage to candidates further down the page.
Right, I'll bring the town clerk in order to cover that particular process. Thank you.
We can change the voting to that way of voting if you wish.
Well, sorry, Madam Mayor, for you,
Yes,
I don't believe it's a change. I believe that's the correct way.
There's actually no process laid down, so this is what we need to decide tonight.
I support Councillor Geldard in that.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, so yes, we'll. I've lost my screen altogether. Right, had a temporary blip there where I lost my screen altogether. So we'll now go through all the members, and if members can decide which of the applicants they would like to vote for, officers will then total up the number of votes for each candidate. So just to remind members again, candidate one is Andrew C. Anderson. Candidate two is Rebecca Calder. Candidate three is John Conroy. And candidate four is Rachel Richards. Councillor Gemma Abley, we'll go through this process again.
I will vote for Rachel Richards.
Councillor Neil Foster.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Alan Gardner.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ian Geldard.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ron Hiley.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Ian Machin.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Judith Machin.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Clive Maddison.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Billy McAloon.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Pete Malloy. Can you take your mute off, Councillor Malloy?
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Dean Ranyard,
Rebecca Calder,
Councillor Alice Smith,
Andrew Anderson,
Councillor Kathy Thompson,
Rachel Riches,
Councillor Kevin Thompson,
Rachel Riches,
Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
Rachel Richards.
And can I have the totals, please?
Andrew Anderson, 7. Rebecca Calder, 4. Jane Conroy, 0. And Rachel Riches, 4. I don't think anyone heard that.
That's wrong. No.
Did members hear that vote? The results of the vote?
Okay. And Andrew Anderson, 7. Rebecca Calder, 4. Jay Conroy, 0. Rachel Riches, 4.
Right, I'll move back now to the town clerk to move progress on this vote.
Nobody received more than 50% of the vote, so we moved to a second vote with 3 candidates. And as John Conroy didn't receive any votes, the second round will include Andrew Anderson, Rebecca Calder and Rachel Riches.
It's going to be the same.
Just carry on. To the next round. Start the list again.
Right. So we now have Rebecca Calder and Rachel Richards and Andrew Anderson. We've already gone through that. Right. So we've now, sorry, I'm going to bring the town clerk back in just to go through on this one. This isn't a process I'm familiar with.
Just to remind members, we now have 3 candidates in the second round of voting. Andrew Anderson, Rebecca Calder, Rachel Riches. So the chair will now go through the full list of councillors again to get your votes on the next 3 candidates.
Right. Was 0 on that?
Point of order, Madam Mayor. From the information that was sent out to members, it said, for example, if candidate A receives 4 votes and candidates B and C receive 2 votes each, candidate A is not elected as he has the same number of votes as B and C together. In such case, it is necessary to conduct a ballot between the tied candidate to eliminate one of them. So should this second ballot just be between the 2 candidates that are tied?
No, because the first vote was for the 4 candidates. The one that received the least number of votes is eliminated and you move on to the 3. The tie doesn't count because we have a candidate that didn't score anything.
Okay,
so now members have an opportunity to vote again.
Thank you for clarifying, Town Clerk. Thank you.
Right, so we'll go run through these candidates again. So we have candidate 1 is Andrew Anderson, candidate 2 Rebecca Calder, and candidate 3 Rachel Richards. Councillor Gemma Abley.
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Neil Foster.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Alan Gardner.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ian Geldard.
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ron Hiley.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Ian Machin.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Judith Machin.
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Clive Maddison,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Billy McAloon,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Pete Malloy,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Dean Ranyard,
Rebecca Calder,
Councillor Alice Smith,
Again,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Kathy Thompson,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Kevin Thompson,
Rachel Riches.
and Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
Rachel Riches.
As the voting has produced the same results, we now need to have a vote with just the two candidates that tied in order to eliminate one of them to go to a final vote with two candidates. So the next round of voting will only include Rebecca Calder and Rachel Riches.
Councillor Gemma Abley,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Neil Foster,
Rachel Richards.
Councillor Alan Gardner,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Ian Geldard,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Ron Hiley,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Ian Machin,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Judith Machin,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Clive Maddison,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Billy McAloon,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Pete Malloy,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Dean Ranyard,
Rebecca Calder,
Councillor Alice Smith,
Rebecca Calder.
Councillor Kathy Thompson,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Kevin Thompson,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
Rachel Riches.
Okay, so we've got Rebecca Calder with 7 votes and Rachel Riches with 8 votes.
So Rachel Richards will move forward into the next vote. So
The
that,
next vote is between Andrew Anderson and Rachel Riches. So the chair will go through the members again.
Councillor Gemma Abley,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Neil Foster,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Alan Gardner,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ian Geldard,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Ron Hiley,
Rachel Richards.
Councillor Ian Machin,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Judith Machin,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Clive Maddison,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Billy McAloon,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Pete Malloy,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Dean Ranyard,
Rachel Riches,
Councillor Alice Smith,
Andrew Anderson.
Councillor Kathy Thompson, can you take your mute off, please?
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Kevin Thompson,
Rachel Riches.
Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
Rachel Riches.
And can I have the totals, please?
Andrew Anderson has 7 votes and Rachel Riches has 8 votes.
That means that Rachel Riches is duly co-opted, so I shall be contacting her tomorrow to arrange for her to come in and sign her declaration.
And congratulations to Rachel Richards.
uh,
Can you take your mute off, please? On, sorry. And we now go to item 10, performance management. Do I have you down for a request to speak, Councillor Ranyard?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to query one of the things on performance management, going back to September 2019, the resurfacing of car parks. I just wondered what the latest situation was with the preschool at Kirk Merrington. I was up in that area a few weeks ago, and that road into the preschool is quite bad with potholes, etc. So I was just wanting to know where we were at. Under progress to date, it says plaque approved awaiting a date for installation. I guess that's an error that shouldn't be in that place.
I'll bring the town clerk in on this one. Sorry. Mr. Ranson, would you like to speak on this particular item?
Yes, through you, Chair. The Kirk Merrington Preschool, the road outside actually doesn't belong to the council. So where the main problems are is an unadopted road, and the responsibility of the road outside of the preschool is the ownership of the houses in that little block. So it's their responsibility. We've had a chat with an informal chat with our insurances, and they were suggesting that we shouldn't take on that responsibility, because if we do, then any liability would land with the council. Once you're inside the gate, then it's the council's responsibility, but the small road entrance area is the responsibility of the householders in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Ranson. I've got Councillor Ron Hurley would like to speak. Could you take your mute off, Councillor Hurley? Thank you.
I don't want to particularly speak on this matter, but I inadvertently used a bit of bad language while I'm out, and I would like to apologise for that, if anyone heard it.
Thank you, Councillor Hurley. And I have no other comments on the performance management. So we'll move on now to item 11, Standards Board referral decision notice, Councillor Gardner for information, and I'll bring the town clerk in to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. This report is just to advise members of the results of a Standards Board referral made by a member of the public. Again,
Mike's gone off.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right, great. So the purpose of this report is just to advise members of the results of a Standards Board referral made by a member of the public against Councillor Gardner. Members are just asked to note the contents of the report and the decision that no further action will be taken.
I have no request to speak on this item, so we'll now move on to item 12, Standards Board referral, decision notice, Councillor Geldard, report for information, and I'll bring the town clerk in to speak on this item.
This report again is to advise members of the results of the Standards Board referral with a complaint made against Councillor Geldard. There will be no further action taken against Councillor Geldart, but the one thing to note is that the governance solicitor recommends that where members wish to raise concerns, either with other members or officers of the council, these should be raised with relevant individuals rather than sent to all members.
Thank you, Town Clerk. I have Councillor Ron Hiley with a request to speak.
Yeah, my main concern is the publication of these two results from the Standards Board. It has caused a bit of controversy between certain members of the council. Can the Town Clerk please confirm that this is okay and a legal requirement by the person who was or has been vindicated from this complaints?
I contacted Legal and Democratic Services who investigate these complaints and publish them, and they've advised that this is a public process because councillors are public appointees. Durham County Council subsequently print the results of investigations on their website. They have to keep them for 6 years in case any member of the public or the press want to view them. The press can repeat these in full in the paper. There is absolutely nothing wrong with presenting them tonight.
Thank you for that, Town Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hiley. I have no other requests to speak on this item, so we'll now move on to item 13, which is bus shelters report.
Members will remember that this report came below the line initially, as it had lots of costs in and commercially sensitive information. So it's now come back before members with that information taken out. Members will be aware that we were making several enquiries into bus shelters because it's been an ongoing problem for some time and being damaged. And we were looking for a medium to long-term solution. So we were looking at how much it would cost to replace glass shelters with stone shelters. Would Clear Channel, an advertising company, be willing to take over any of the shelters? How much it would cost to replace the remaining glass panels in shelters with the PTEG, because it's more robust than glass. Are there any shelters not in use which could be removed permanently? And are there any shelters which need replacing for safety reasons? Members will remember that Durham County Council were contacted in relation to stone bus shelters, and they've advised they've been phasing them out for the past 10 years because they are costly to repair. And also that stone bus shelters attract antisocial behaviour because no one can see what's going on inside them. They are dark and peer dingy and smelly in years to come. Feedback from the community is that the elderly feel really vulnerable in stone bus shelters as they cannot see who is approaching. And likewise, when an elderly person is approaching a bus shelter themselves, they are nervous as they cannot see who is inside. In relation to the enquiries, Clear Channel have indicated that due to the impact of COVID on their business, they're not interested in taking on any additional shelters at this time. The indicative cost for replacing the remaining glass panels with PTEG is what was outlined in the previous report. There are 2 bus shelters which are not in use on Rock Road, one glass metal and one stone. Glass metal shelter is extensively damaged at the present time, and the Grounds and Estates officer has identified one glass metal bus shelter on Mount Pleasant View, which he believes requires replacing as the structural integrity has been affected due to the damage caused to panels. And plus, he believes it will cost more to reinstate, to repair, than it will to replace. So stone bus shelters, there are currently 12 non-stone shelters, and to replace them was as per the previous report. The cost of replacing the remaining glass panels was as per the previous report. The quotes for removing the 3 bus stops are indicated in the previous report, and it was to be noted that if we removed all 3 at the same time, the contractor could give us a discount as he would be able to bring all the staff in and all of the relevant equipment at once. To replace the shelter mentioned at 3.6, 3 quotes, and they were mentioned in the last report. And there may be costs associated with road closure, traffic management, etc. And that was outlined in the previous report. There are 3 options available in relation to paying for the works. The earmarked reserve set aside at year end for the tractor was identified at 69,500. However, a replacement at a value of 36 has been identified. Therefore, there is a possible 33,500 available from this budget. The general contingency budget for this year stands at just over 13,000, and the large assets reserve, which at the end of this financial year will stand at 100,000. The proposals are: should we continue to replace damaged panels on a piece-by-piece basis or undertake a project to try to resolve the issue in one project? If the council wishes to address the issue in one project, does it wish to replace all bush shelters with stone shelters, or does it wish to replace all existing glass panels with the new PTEG, which is proven to be more effective at deterring vandals than the current panels? As part of the project, does it wish to remove the 2 unused bush shelters on Rock Road? And as part of the project, does it wish to replace the damaged shelter on Mount Pleasant View? Officers recommend that all bush shelters are looked at in a single project to address this long-standing issue of vandalism. Bearing in mind the comments from DCC in relation to stone bush shelters and the costs associated with replacing glass shelters with stone shelters, officers do not recommend this course of action, and that the option of replacing all existing glass panels with PTEG is chosen. Officers recommend that the 2 bush shelters on Rock Road are removed completely as a long-term solution to the vandalism which is being visited on them. Officers recommend that the bush shelter mentioned at 3.6 is removed and replaced. Officers recommend that quote 3 is accepted in relation to the replacement of the bush shelter on Mount Pleasant View, and it should be noted that all quotes received are valid for 30 days only, and therefore some of the quotes may change. It has taken longer than 30 days to receive and collate all the information and bring it to council. But what we would do, if any of them went up in an exceptional amount, we'd have to come back to council. And if all of the recommendations are approved, the total indicative cost will be as outlined in the previous report. So members are asked to decide which options they wish to go with.
Right, thank you, Town Clerk. I have got a few requests to speak. Councillor Clive Madison.
Thank you, Chair. Bush shelters. The last time I was on a bus or in a bush shelter was 1974. But I do think this report is an excellent report, and it shows us where we should be going to. I'm not going to put any motions or anything in. I do think that the replacement of Mount Pleasant, because that lets the town down, that's got to go totally. I do think that the PTEG, as long as we don't get it damaged, is a good way forward. Up to now, according to Colin, we haven't had any of them damaged. So we should be going ahead with this and removing all the toughened glass, which seem to get broken all the time. On removing the bush shelters on Rock Road, I'm 100% behind this. We removed the one in Viners Close. We tried for 16 years to get this one removed, and we couldn't get it moved. And then the first thing, when Spennymoor Independence came back in, Colin said, "Do you want this on the agenda?" I said, "No, not this year, maybe the year after." And we did get that removed. But bush shelters which are not being used, the town clerk should go ahead and see that there's definitely no start-ups of any buses. But I like the stone bush shelters. I think on health and safety, if a car rides into them, and they all get well used on a morning when I go past Grayson Road, they're all pretty full. I do have me worries if a car smashed into one of these plastic metal ones, but hopefully they should all be under standards. But I think this report's great. Replace the Mount Pleasant one, do the PTEG, and remove the ones which are not getting used. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kevanaugh, Councillor Cathy Thompson.
Yes, Chair, just a couple of things. First of all, do the bush shelters include seats? When I was doing some checks on the information that were given before, then we weren't able to speak because a motion was moved for it to bring to this meeting. I meant to ask, does the cost for these bush shelters include seats?
Yes, it does.
Right. Secondly, PTEG. I know it's tougher than toughened glass, but have we been using something else in the meantime that's more expensive?
I'll bring the town clerk in.
We've been using the PTEG on a piece-by-piece basis. So if a panel is shattered in a bus stop, we replace that panel. Unlike the toughened glass is designed to shatter into 1,000,000 pieces, which is why I think they're like shattering them, where the PTEG is solid and doesn't shatter and would take someone standing there for an inordinate amount of time, so they can't just hit it and run. So it is a vandal deterrent.
And finally, Chair, if I may, we could be going to take some of the cost out of the tractor, which was identified at 69,500, which has come down dramatically. Is that tractor that we're going to take going to be a second-hand tractor, or is it going to be a new tractor? And will it be of the same standard as the one that was valued at 69,500?
It's a new tractor, and the whole cost was put in because we weren't sure which attachments we might need, and we still may need some attachments, but we do think that we can pay for the bus shelters out of this and purchase any attachments that we subsequently need.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Neil Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree that I think we need to do this in a comprehensive matter rather than do it piecemeal. So I agree with the report that it should be done that way. I believe that PTEC is the way forward, and I think doing that in a well-managed manner will help us keep the costs down. I'm more than happy to support the Mount Pleasant View, which is a bus stop I'm more familiar with. And I obviously will take local members' advice on the Rock Road situation. But overall, I think it's a good report. It's well sourced, and I'm more than happy to support the conclusions.
Councillor Dean Ranyard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the officers for pulling all this information together. I tend to agree that this should be looked at as one project. There's been quite a lot of vandalism on the glass bus shelters right across the town, and as the town clerk pointed out, the toughened glass shatters into 1,000,000 pieces, and it leaves quite a mess when it's broken. So I do think the time has come to get that toughened glass replaced with PTEG, and I think all shelters should be done in one go. I don't agree with replacing the shelters with stone shelters. The cost would be phenomenal, and I don't think that's the way forward. We should keep the stone shelters we have, but there's no need to be building new ones. The Mount Pleasant View one does need to be replaced. I've seen people stood there waiting for a bus from that shelter, and it is in a bit of a state, so that one does need to be replaced. And I would go with the quote 3 that's listed in the recommendations. The only recommendation that I'm not wanting to support is the removal of the 2 bus shelters on Rock Road. I understand buses don't currently serve them, but I just think it's a waste of money to be spending money to take something out that doesn't necessarily need to be taken out. Buses may start using that route again, so they may be needed in the future. The shelter that Councillor Mr. Madison talks about on Viners Close, I believe there was a safety issue raised with that particular shelter, and that cars pulling out of a junction will find it difficult to see. I don't see that there's the same issue here, so I would move that we accept all recommendations except 6.3, and we do not remove the 2 bus shelters on Rock Road. Thank you.
Right. I do have other people that would like to speak, so I'll run through the members that wish to speak and come back to you if that's a motion on the table, Councillor Ranyard. Councillor Ian Machin.
I agree with the comments made by the other councillors, with the exception of the last one. I'm in favour of removing the 2 bus shelters as advised by the officers having inspected them, and that's their decision. So I'd be happy to move the motion and accept the recommendations, which are all listed in item 6. Thank you.
Councillor Pete Malloy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, during this year, I've had a few members of the public contact me over issues with the bus shelters, and I've been in communication with both the town clerk and the facilities manager, who've assisted me in this matter, and I'd like to thank them for their assistance in that and keeping us well informed of the repairs that have already been done. Yeah, it's a great report. I support the recommendations that's in it. With regards to 6.3, the one on the bus stop on the side, same side as the cemetery, obviously, because it's ours and it's in a poor state of repair, we still owe members of the public a duty of care. So we can't leave that in if it's not getting used, because if a member of the public were to damage themselves, the council would be liable. So if there's no way that the bus service is going to run, it would be best to remove that. And if we're going to remove the stone one on the opposite side of the road, what would be the possibility of keeping the materials, i.e. the stone materials from that bus shelter, to keep, if there's any repairs needed, doing on other stone bus shelters around the town? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Malloy. We'd have to go back to the company, because the quote we've received for demolishing them is for them to remove it and do with the stone as they wish. Normally that results in a cheaper quote. If we say we want to keep the stone, we're probably going to have to pay extra and possibly pay to have it moved to a location of our choice as well. But we can do that. We can ask the question. It will just delay this a bit further.
Thanks for that, Sam Clark. Yeah, I was just thinking of obviously if that stone is the same type of material that's on existing but stone shelters, that we may not be able to replace, get like for like, if that's all. But obviously if the costs doesn't make it feasible, I understand.
I'll definitely make those enquiries, because it may be, I don't know what state the stone will be in when they've demolished the shelter, but if there's anything that we could keep, I will ask the question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kevin or Kathy Thompson?
Chair, my question has been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Gardner or Councillor Alice Smith?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, just to thank the Town Clerk and the officers for putting together the report. Obviously comprehensive, and it builds on what we've got previously. I can only totally agree with this, especially I've spoke extensively with the people at Durham County Council who deal with the bus services, especially when it comes around planning and actually getting bus services that are put into planning applications to say it's sustainable if we actually give that, if we make the estate accessible to buses, and they're looking within the distance of about a mile. So that there is very little chance that we will ever see any bus services running again up Rock Road. I don't think it would be financially viable for any service, in the same vein as we've actually seen a reduction in services that run out to Tuddermore and around the Durham Gate area. So with that in mind, I absolutely 100% the recommendations of the Town Clerk, and if there is a motion to be put, I'd like to put that we accept this in its totality.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. The question of the bus shelters, whether or not there was actually a service running at Rock Road, was a question that I asked for the Town Clerk. I'll bring the Town Clerk in on that particular item.
Yeah, all the bus companies can say is that there is no service, and at this moment in time they don't have a crystal ball and they can't predict if there ever will be again.
I can't see it. Right, you okay with that, Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Geldard.
Madam Mayor, I speak to formally second Councillor Ranyard's motion, which was to accept the recommendations excluding 6.3. As members know, Councillor Ranyard and I are the local ward members up there, and I hope our opinions were held somewhere tonight. Having lived very close to one of those bus shelters on Rock Road for a long time, I know that there's no service, i.e. there's no paid service bus that picks up from the stone bus shelter on Rock Road. It is used quite often for other services. For example, there is a coach of Sunderland fans, and you know, not wanting to hold much sympathy for Sunderland fans, but they do get picked up from that stone bus shelter on Rock Road on a match day. And so I think to demolish that bus shelter would be a disservice to our community. I'm not so inclined about the well, I would say the glass one's got no glass left in it, but by the cemetery, I know that has been out of use for some time, and I'm not opposed to that one getting demolished, but I certainly think we should be retaining that stone bush shelter on Rock Road because it is used by the community. For all, it's not used as a service bus stop. Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
I've got to say, not like Clive, I use the bus regularly. And yesterday I was in the stone bus shelter on Grayson Road and it was immaculate. It was clean. I tapped the roof, it was solid. There was no damage, just a bit of damage to the no smoking sign. It was in excellent condition.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I did have a comment from Councillor Neil Foster. Did you wish to speak at all, Councillor Foster, or was it just a comment that you wanted us to be aware of?
No, the points have been covered. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. If we can now sum up on the recommendations and also the motion as presented.
Chair, I've got an RTS in. I've got an RTS in.
All right, that's just come in at the last minute. Before yourself, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ron Hiley.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Councillor Geldart. I think Middleston Moor has quite a number of stone bus shelters, and they're all well kept and well maintained. And as you know, it'll be a darn disgrace if we have to pull one of them down. So I've got to support Councillor Geldart and Councillor Ranyard in this motion.
And Councillor Kevin or Councillor Cathy Thompson.
It's me, Chair. Chair, I was always going to support Councillor Ranyard, but I just would like some clarification. Councillor Geldart said he didn't mind the glass one being knocked down. I think Councillor Ranyard moved that they both be knocked down. Can we just have some clarification there?
Madam Mayor, if I may, my motion was to accept all of the recommendations except 6.3. So that would mean to retain both of the bus shelters on Rock Road that currently aren't being used.
And we've got Councillor Geldart supporting your motion, Councillor Ranyard.
Yeah, and on a point of explanation, if I can, Madam Mayor, for all I mentioned in my prose that I wasn't too bothered about the glass bus shelter on Rock Road. I haven't amended Councillor Ranyard's motion.
Thank you. And before we go for a vote on that, I'd like to bring in Councillor Gardner again.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in light of what local members have said, I think we should really take a lot of notice of what they're saying with regards to Rock Road. I think those of us that are down at Tudor have had our say, and I think people agree with us. I think it's down really because of this item in the recommendations that it is down to the ward members to put forward a motion, and I think their motion should be taken very highly.
Thank you. Councillor Pete Malloy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I've heard, like Councillor Gardner, on what the ward members for Middleston Moor has said, and also the stone one is actually into Spennymoor ward on Rock Road, but also taking on board what others have said over the stone shelters. I know I mentioned it as well, if it needs to come down, but I would be quite happy keeping it for community use because it is a pretty sturdy building. If 6.3 could be changed to recommend the one on Rock Road on the cemetery, I wonder if members would be more pleased with that one.
Is that a motion that you wish to put on the table, Councillor Malloy?
Yeah, I'll move that 6.3 is changed to only the one bus shelter on the same side of the cemetery to be pulled down.
I'd like
I'll
to second that.
Thank you. I'm going to bring this to a halt with the final speaker, and that's Councillor Machin. I'll then bring in the town clerk with regard to the recommendations. Thank you.
Just a question, if I may, Mayor. Is the intention in this motion that the glass stroke metal shelter, which is extensively damaged, is it that that's repaired? Is that part of this motion?
No,
Or is it
removed.
to leave it as it is if we're not going to remove it?
I believe the shelter is the extensively damaged one, which is at Mount Pleasant.
No, he's on about the one on Rock Road. So
One in Rock Road.
Okay.
the glass and metal one, if we had to repair it, would probably cost more to repair than it would to take it down. And bearing in mind, there's not going to be any service there. So I'll just try and clarify what's happened in the last few minutes. Everybody seems to be happy with recommendation 6.1 and recommendation 6.2. But in relation to 6.3, Councillor Ranyard put forward a motion that both shelters on Rock Road should be retained. Councillor Malloy put forward a motion that only the stone shelter be retained, and he got a seconder. We don't seem to have a seconder for Councillor Ranyard's that both bus shelters should be retained.
On a point of order, Madam Mayor. Point of order, Madam Mayor. I formally seconded Councillor Ranyard's motion.
But then you said you weren't bothered. Can you just clarify that? So
I said I wasn't.
Right, we'll take a vote on Councillor
Yes.
Ranyard's motion first then, and that is to retain both the stone and the glass and metal shelter.
Yeah. Councillor Geldard, Councillor Geldard, I believe you did second Councillor Dane Ranyard on the motion that he put forward.
I did, Madam Mayor, and therefore Councillor Malloy's motion would in fact be an amendment to Councillor Ranyard's, and therefore the voting on Councillor Malloy's amendment should be first.
I agree on that, yes.
But point of order, can the question be answered about whether the intention in Councillor Geldard and Councillor Ranyard's motion is to leave the damaged bus shelter as it is or repair it?
No, if it was left, it would have to be repaired because it's...
Point of order, Madam Mayor. That's not for the town clerk to answer. That's for Councillor Ranyard to answer. He's the one moving the motion.
Councillor Ranyard.
I don't see any need to conduct extensive repairs on the shelter if it isn't used. My motion was to avoid unnecessary spends on removing the shelter. So as long as the shelter can be made safe, I don't see any need to therefore make it part of the overall refurbishment plan. The aim of my motion was just to avoid the council spending money on removing shelters where it wasn't necessary.
We would have to repair the bus shelter in order to maintain its structural integrity, so we would have to spend money on it.
Well, in that case, I would need to see the options and the costs before I could speak further on that.
I believe on that particular item then, we will have to move that to another meeting in order to... Yeah. I'm being advised by the town clerk to take Councillor Pete Malloy's motion first. Can
Point of
you
order, Madam.
your motion, Councillor Malloy?
Amendment.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, people were talking over each other.
Can you repeat your motion, Councillor Malloy?
Sorry, on a point of order, Madam Mayor. Point of order being that Councillor Malloy has moved an amendment, not a motion.
Yes, we're voting on Councillor Malloy's amendment, Councillor Geldard.
Can we make sure what the amendment is, please, Madam Mayor?
Yes, that's why I've asked Councillor Malloy to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, it's looking at 6.3 is recommends the removal of only one bus shelter on Rock Road, which will be the one on the same side of the cemetery, the one that's damaged. Leaving
And
the
is
stuff.
there a seconder for councillor Malloy's motion?
I think Councillor Wood seconded that, Madam Mayor, but if she hasn't, I will.
I'll second it.
Thank you, councillor Wood. I will now take a vote on this item, and I'll go through members on that vote. Councillor Gemma Abley.
For.
Councillor Neil Foster.
For.
Councillor Alan Gardner. Councillor Gardner. Can you take your mute button off, Councillor Gardner? Could you repeat that, Councillor Gardner? Did you get that?
I think his screen looks frozen.
For the motion, Chair.
For.
To support. Councillor Hiley.
For the motion, Chair.
Councillor Ian Machin.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, you've missed me out.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Geldard. I do apologise. Councillor Geldard.
For the amendment.
Councillor Ian Machin.
For the amendment.
Councillor Judith Machin.
For the amendment.
Councillor Clive Maddison.
For the amendment.
On this particular one, I am for the amendment. Councillor Billy McAloon. Councillor Pete Malloy.
For.
Councillor Dean Ranyard.
Well, based on the fact that it may be more expensive to restore the bus shelter to a safe condition, then I'll vote for the amendment.
Councillor Alice Smith.
For the amendment.
Councillor Kathy Thompson.
For the amendment.
Councillor Kevin Thompson.
For the amendment.
Councillor Elizabeth Wood.
For the amendment.
And I have no one against that amendment. So that amendment is therefore carried. Thank you. Can we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 14, selection boxes. And I'll refer to the town clerk on this for her report. Thank you.
Thank you. This is to provide members with information on what will happen with the distribution of selection boxes this December. Unfortunately, due to the current COVID crisis, Santa will not be in his grotto this year in the town hall. And we usually invite primary schools and their associated nurseries to bring classes of children to Santa's grotto, where Santa gives them a selection box each, and they usually bring years 1, 2 and 3. In addition to the above, there is a day when Santa is open to the general public and other organisations such as private nurseries to attend. In 2019, the council gave away just over 1,600 selection boxes. And as we can't do this year, we've come up with another suggestion, and that is to ensure that a large proportion of children do receive a selection box each, that we give the required number to each of the primary schools and their associated nurseries. They've been contacted to ascertain how many children they currently have enrolled, and also to do something different, because as we know, those in care homes have had a tough time this year due to COVID. So the suggestion is that we provide a selection box to each of the residents in the care homes, which is a relatively small number. So we have Sycamore Lodge, Lothian House and Appleton Lodge. So the total number of children and residents in care homes was 2,114. The total cost would be £1,783.50. So members are asked to note the contents of the report.
So members being asked to note the contents of the report, and I have Councillor Dean Ranyard and followed by Councillor Kevin Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and I'd like to thank the Town Clerk for pulling this together. And I think it's a really excellent idea to spread some Christmas cheer and what's been quite a difficult year for everybody. So I think this is a fantastic idea just to spread a little bit of Christmas happiness around the children and the older residents of the town. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Chair, it's a great idea and I thank you for the report. But to ensure that a large proportion of children, why can we not cover the other nurseries like Kirkmerriton and I believe there's some down Tudor? I mean, the cost is not fantastic. We could leave ourselves open to a little bit of criticism at the time of good cheer for not a large amount of money.
It is a question I also asked Councillor Thompson. I'll bring the Town Clerk in with regard to that.
That would add another 235 selection boxes.
Chair, I would move that we cover all the nurseries.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. And the recommendation on the table is to include all nurseries, including private ones. So can we go through the voting process with regard to this, or are members happy to accept the amendment that's on the table?
Happy.
Happy to accept.
Happy.
Happy.
So that appears to be a consensus there. So if I can ask the Town Clerk to add on the private nurseries as well. Thank you.
We will do. Thank you.
And that concludes the items on tonight's agenda. Thank you for your participation and good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.